November 26th, 1994, Thanksgiving weekend, Darrington Unit, south of Houston, Texas. At 9:15 p.m., the entire prison went dark. The lights snapped off, alarms roared through the cell blocks, officers rushed toward the towers with rifles drawn, inmates yelled from their cells, chaos building. In that moment, 3 men were already in motion. They had been waiting for this night, counting every patrol, every shift change, every gap in the system. Their plan was direct: cut through the first fence, scale the second, and run before the guards could surround them. It was a gamble few had ever attempted at Darrington, one of the most violent units in Texas. By the end of the night, 2 men would be dragged back in chains. But the third one would make it further than anyone thought possible. His name was Dennis Wayne Hope, 22 years old, serving an 80-year sentence for armed robberies. The state of Texas had decided his life would end behind razor wire. On that night, he proved them wrong. This is the story of how Dennis Wayne Hope broke free from one of Texas's most secure prisons, evaded a statewide manhunt, and forced the system to chase him across state lines. Dennis Wayne Hope was 22 when the bus carried him south to Darrington Unit. He had been convicted of aggravated robbery. The judge gave him 80 years. There was no realistic chance of parole. The prison was known across Texas. More than 2,000 inmates were housed there. Many were serving life or decades for violent crimes. Officers warned new arrivals. Darrington was not a place to make mistakes. The reception was immediate. Prisoners shouted at the new men as they walked in, called them fresh meat, made threats from the runs. Hope kept his eyes forward. He followed the line through intake. His head was shaved. He was given state clothes and a number, assigned to a cell.
Do not loiter.
He quickly learned the rules.
Stare.
Do not stare at another inmate. Do not touch property that is not yours. Walk in line. Carry your tray level. Those who broke the rules were tested or attacked. Hope stayed quiet and watched. He worked in the kitchen. The job meant long hours, but it gave him movement and routine. He learned schedules, delivery times, the pattern of officers on shift. There he met another inmate, Harry Decker. Older, calm, he did his work without trouble. Hope respected that. Hope filed an appeal to reduce his sentence. He spent time in the law library, but nothing changed. The appeal was denied. The sentence remained. That night, he lay in his bunk and realized something. He might never leave prison alive. Life inside Darrington was designed to break men down. The schedule never changed. Wake up before dawn, count, line up, eat, work, count again. It repeated every day. The unit was surrounded by fields and guard towers. Armed officers watched from above 24 hours a day. Floodlights covered the fences at night. Razor wire lined every barrier. The message was clear: no one leaves. Inside, the violence was constant. Cell blocks held gangs that controlled drugs, money, and protection. Disputes over debts ended with knives made from steel or sharpened wire. New inmates were tested as soon as they arrived. Those who failed to stand their ground were exploited. Hope kept to himself, stayed out of arguments, avoided gambling, worked in the kitchen. He learned that routine gave him some safety. He moved food, scrubbed pans, hauled boxes, hard work, but it kept him away from the worst of the cell block politics. Harry Decker worked beside him. Harry was older, respected. He gave Hope simple advice. Don't lie, don't steal from other inmates, and don't rely on promises. Hope listened. In a place where most words meant nothing, Harry's advice carried weight. But even with the routine, the threat of violence never left. A riot in the mid-90s proved that. One moment, the wing was loud with shouting. The next, inmates were bleeding on the floor. Guards used force to regain control. Bodies were carried out on stretchers. Hope saw it firsthand. The riot made him understand how little control he had over his own survival. If the wrong group targeted him, there would be no warning, no appeal, no chance. From that day forward, Hope stopped thinking about years or decades. He began to think about opportunities. He didn't know how or when, but he knew he had to find a way out. He began by collecting information. Every movement inside the unit followed a pattern, and Hope paid attention to all of it. He watched how long the chow hall doors stayed open during meal times. He counted the minutes between tower checks. He timed the shift changes of officers at the perimeter. The prison had a standard response whenever an escape was reported. Sirens went off, the towers locked their sights on the fields. A 5-mile perimeter was thrown up around the unit. Patrol cars and tracking dogs covered the area. Hope saw it happen when other inmates made attempts. Some were reckless, others poorly planned. None of them got far. But each failure gave him more information about how the system reacted. That was when he set himself a rule. If he ever went for the fence, he had to be outside that 5-mile perimeter within 30 minutes. If he couldn't, he'd be caught. Hope began running every day with that time in his head. He treated every yard session as a test. Could he cover the distance fast enough? Could he maintain his pace without breaking down? His background in cross-country gave him an advantage, but prison had taken away years of freedom. He forced himself to rebuild his endurance. Until 5 miles in under 30 minutes was a guarantee. The next step was tools. The fences were reinforced with razor wire. Cutting through them with bare hands was impossible. Hope arranged a quiet deal with an inmate who worked maintenance. In exchange for extra food from the kitchen, he received a pair of wire cutters. They were small enough to be hidden, but strong enough to slice the wire. He tested them behind the kitchen, where a storage cage held the ice machine. With no one watching, he clipped a strand of wire. The cut was clean. The tool would work. He returned them to the freezer, hidden beneath boxes of meat. To give himself more leverage, he later added copper pipes over the handles, turning them into extended grips. But getting through the fences wasn't the only challenge. Dogs were used on every manhunt. Hope prepared for that as well. He cut strips of prison blankets to tie around his legs, both as padding against razor wire and as a way to mask his scent. He stole socks from the laundry and filled them with cayenne pepper from the kitchen. He believed the spice would throw off the dogs long enough to buy distance. The escape route came together by chance. One afternoon in the chapel, he picked up a church brochure left on the floor. On the back was a map of the area surrounding the unit. It showed roads, landmarks, and a set of power lines that ran toward Houston. That map gave him the missing piece, a clear route once he was outside the wire. He studied it carefully. The objective was simple: clear the fences, sprint past the 5-mile search perimeter, and cross Highway 288 before the net was fully locked down. Once past the highway, he could follow the power lines north, away from the prison. Hope shared his plan with Harry Decker. Harry had been steady in the kitchen. He listened and agreed. Both men knew the risk. Getting caught meant years added to their sentences, or being shot outright. But Harry also knew what Hope did. 80 years left no other future. Later, a third man entered the picture, Jason Montgomery. He worked near the boiler room and had knowledge no one else did. He knew where the generator was located. If that generator could be shut down, the lights over the fences would go out. The towers would lose visibility, even for a few minutes. That advantage could be the difference between freedom and a body on the ground. With Jason's involvement, the plan gained shape. The sequence was clear: take out the power, cut through the first fence, climb the second, and run until the 5-mile perimeter was behind them. By late 1994, the planning was finished. Hope had the cutters modified with copper tubing for extra leverage. He tested them on a hidden fence behind the kitchen. The wires snapped clean. He knew they would hold. The The blankets were cut into strips. Each man had a set to wrap around his legs and waist before climbing the razor wire. Socks filled with cayenne pepper were ready, meant to be pulled on over their shoes before the run. Hope stored them in a box in the kitchen, mixed in with old laundry that no officer checked. Every piece of equipment had a hiding place. The cutters stayed inside the freezer, buried under frozen meat. The blankets were rolled and kept behind a stack of mop handles. Nothing was left in cells where a random search could uncover them. Timing was rehearsed in silence. Hope ran daily in the yard. Pushing himself until 5 miles in under 30 minutes was a guarantee. Harry kept pace as best he could, slower, but committed. Jason, who wasn't a runner, was told to focus on his role with the power. The escape would not happen on a normal weekday. Hope chose Thanksgiving weekend. Fewer ranking officers would be on duty. The night shifts would be handled by staff who wanted nothing more than a quiet post and a quick relief at dawn. In the week leading up to the attempt, Hope watched for changes. He studied tower rotations and head counts, making sure no new measures had been added. He double-checked the path from the kitchen to the yard, noting every gate and lock they would pass through. The last 2 nights before the attempt, Hope barely slept. He knew there would not be another chance if this failed. The cutters could not be replaced. The plan was already whispered about more than once. If an officer caught a hint of it, the lockdown would be immediate. By Saturday evening, November the 26th, everything was set. The tools were hidden in their spots. The route was memorized. Each man knew his task. When the lights went out, they would move. Saturday, November 26th, 1994, Thanksgiving weekend. The prison was quieter than usual. Senior staff were off duty. Night posts were handled by fewer officers. It was the window Hope had been waiting for. At evening count, he kept his head down like everyone else. The cutters were hidden in his shoes, pressed tight against his ankles. Blanket strips were tied under his clothing, ready for the fence. He carried nothing else. Anything extra could slow him down. When the buzzer released his section, he stepped into the corridor. Harry was already moving toward the meeting point. Jason appeared from the opposite wing. They didn't speak. Words were unnecessary. The boiler room door was unlocked as expected. 2 inmate clerks were inside checking gauges. Jason walked in first, acting like it was routine. Hope followed. He pulled a screwdriver from his waistband and ordered them to the ground. Harry tied their hands with strips of cloth. The takeover was quick. Jason moved directly to the generator. He loosened the main fuel line. Hope turned to the backup unit and disconnected it. The effect was immediate. Lights across the yard went dark. Towers lost visibility. Alarms triggered within seconds, echoing across the compound. Hope didn't wait. He pushed the cutters into his waistband and left the room at a run. The others followed. Officers were shouting already, radios crackling with reports of a power loss. They reached the first fence. Hope dropped to his knees and forced the cutters into the wire. The copper handles gave leverage. He clipped section after section until a gap opened wide enough to crawl through. He pulled it apart with his hands and slid under. Harry followed, then Jason. The second fence stood directly ahead, taller, lined with razor wire across the top. Climbing it was the only option. Hope threw himself upward. His blanket strips caught the wire but held. He swung his leg over, shifted his weight, dropped to the ground outside. His coat tore, but he was free. Harry went next. He slowed halfway. His clothing caught in the wire. Hope looked back and saw him stuck at the top. Shots rang out from the tower. Dirt kicked up around them. Without hesitation, Hope ran back. He grabbed Harry by the arm and pulled hard until the fabric ripped loose. Harry tumbled over the side. Jason climbed last. He cleared the top as the gunfire grew closer. By now, the towers had confirmed movement. Orders were shouted into radios. Sirens changed pitch. The escape was no longer hidden. Hope hit the ground running. He sprinted toward the open field beyond the fences. Harry struggled behind him, limping from the fall. Jason was slower still. The gunfire followed them into the dark. The escape had begun. Every second from that point forward would decide whether they lived or died. The second fence was behind them. Ahead lay open fields. Floodlights were out, but the towers had already fired. Radios crackled across the unit. Officers were moving to block every exit. Hope didn't slow. He sprinted into the dark. He knew the response. Within minutes, a 5-mile perimeter would be sealed. Patrol cars, dogs, armed teams closing the area. If he didn't clear that line in half an hour, he would be caught. Harry was struggling after his fall. His limp slowed him. Jason was further behind, winded and out of rhythm. Hope pushed forward alone. He had no choice. The ground was flat and exposed. Every step felt visible. Shots cracked from the towers. Some struck dirt within yards of him. He kept his pace, focusing only on distance. Behind him, officers shouted to hold the line. Within minutes, searchlights mounted on vehicles swept across the field. Engines roared, the sound of dogs carried in the air. Hope veered toward the power lines he had memorized from the map. They would guide him north toward Houston. Crossing the fields, he kept moving. He didn't stop for Harry or Jason. He didn't look back at the towers. The plan allowed no time for hesitation. The perimeter was forming. Officers spread along the outer roads. Patrols set positions at intersections. Radios confirmed sightings. The net was almost closed. Hope ran harder. He had trained for this exact moment. 5 miles in 30 minutes was the rule. If he could stay ahead of the dogs and reach the highway, he would be outside the net. The lights of Highway 288 came into view. Cars moved along it, unaware of the escape underway less than a mile away. Hope dropped low and crawled the last stretch, keeping his body below the headlights. When a gap opened, he crossed on all fours. From a distance, he looked like an animal moving through the grass. No vehicle stopped, no officer fired. Once across, he stood again. The 5-mile line was behind him. The prison was still in chaos, but he was out. Harry and Jason would not make it. They were caught within the search zone in the following days. Hope was the only one who cleared the perimeter. From that moment, he was officially a fugitive. Hope cleared the highway and kept running. He didn't stop until the lights of the prison were far behind. By then, the dogs were loose and vehicles were combing the area. But he was already outside the net. He moved cautiously through back roads and brush until morning. At first, he had nothing but the clothes on his body and the cutters he had carried out. No food, no money, and no safe place to hide. Within a day, he made his first move. On a rural road, he flagged down an elderly man driving a pickup. When the man stopped, Hope climbed inside and ordered him to drive. He didn't have a weapon, but he acted as if he did. The man complied. Hope took his wallet in the truck, leaving him on the roadside. The wallet gave him a small amount of cash. It wasn't enough. He needed more to stay ahead of law enforcement. In a nearby town, he walked into a store. At the counter, he pulled out a BB gun he had bought from a local shop. It looked real, and that was enough. He ordered the clerk to empty the safe. The money went into a bag. He left before alarms could trigger a response. It worked. He repeated the method at other stores across Dallas and later in Memphis. Quick entries, fast demands, cash taken and out. The BB gun stayed hidden until the last second. Clerks assumed it was real. The money gave him mobility. He bought clothes, rented cheap motel rooms, stayed on the move. In Memphis, he used stolen cash for nights in bars and casinos. He dated women, spent freely, lived as if the manhunt wasn't closing in. But the robberies drew attention. Police linked the pattern to his past crimes. Investigators confirmed he was active again, and that meant he was close. Every robbery narrowed the search. Hope didn't care. He was free, and he was determined to enjoy it while it lasted. The first sightings came quickly. Convenience stores and small businesses across Texas began reporting late-night robberies. Witnesses described a man wearing dark clothes, often with his face partially covered. The method was consistent. A weapon shown or implied, money demanded, no unnecessary words exchanged. It was the pattern of someone moving fast, leaving before police could respond. Investigators compared the reports. The height, the build, the mannerisms, all pointed to Hope. Surveillance footage from grainy cameras supported the link. Each new robbery confirmed that the escapee was still out there, and still desperate. Evidence started to accumulate. One stolen car was abandoned outside of Dallas. Another was later discovered in Tennessee. Fingerprints inside the second vehicle matched Hope's prison records. That gave investigators a clear sign. He had made it out of Texas and was heading east. By the time they traced him to Memphis, the operation had shifted. Local police joined state investigators, hotels, rental agencies, pawn shops were canvassed. Hope had to keep moving, but his trail was visible to anyone piecing it together, step by step. The key break came from a phone call. Hope had reached out to a woman in Dallas. Records showed he was using payphones in Memphis to contact her. Surveillance teams zeroed in on that link. When she agreed to cooperate, they asked her to page him. Hope called back. He told her he was at a club called Denim and Diamonds. He even described what he was wearing: a cowboy hat, jeans, boots, a Western shirt. He said he was driving a Jaguar. It was a mistake that would end his run. Agents moved quickly. They located the Jaguar parked outside the club, punctured the tires to stop him from fleeing. They coordinated with local officers, set positions, prepared to move in. Inside, the nightclub was packed. Music and crowds worked both for and against the arrest. Hope blended in, but the noise also let officers close the distance without being noticed. Step by step, they moved through the crowd until they had him in sight. When the order came, they acted at once. Hope resisted, trying to pull free, but the struggle lasted only seconds. He was wrestled to the ground, handcuffed on the floor of the club. After 90 days on the run, Dennis Wayne Hope's escape was over. When Dennis Wayne Hope was taken into custody in Memphis, the U.S. Marshals wasted no time. He was booked locally, then transferred under heavy guard back to Texas. For officials, the response was to make sure it never happened again. Hope was returned directly to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. From the moment he arrived, his status was clear: escape risk, high threat. He wasn't placed back in general population. Instead, he was escorted into solitary confinement, the administrative segregation wing known for holding the most dangerous inmates in the state. The conditions were strict and absolute. A small concrete cell, roughly 6 by 10 feet, a steel door with a narrow slit for food, one bed, one toilet, little else. Lights remained on around the clock. Time outside the cell was limited to 1 hour a day in a small cage yard, and even that was in complete isolation. Contact with others was minimal. Meals were slid through the slot. Movement inside the prison meant full restraints: handcuffs, waist chain, leg irons, armed escort. Every interaction was controlled, every privilege stripped. The official reason was security. After 90 days on the run, robbing businesses, stealing vehicles, Hope had shown he could outmaneuver law enforcement. The state decided he would not get another opportunity. Years passed in this cycle. What was meant as a precaution became permanent. Solitary confinement became his world. By the mid-2000s, Hope had been locked in isolation for more than a decade, one of the longest continuous solitary confinements in Texas. By 2017, Dennis Wayne Hope had spent more than 23 years in solitary confinement. Hope began to argue that this was not punishment anymore, it was torture. From his cell, he started writing legal filings. Over time, his claim reached the courts. He argued that his prolonged isolation violated the 8th Amendment ban on cruel and unusual punishment, and the 14th Amendment's guarantee of due process. The lawsuit attracted attention. Prison experts noted that long-term solitary confinement had devastating psychological effects. Studies showed that extended isolation caused depression, hallucinations, anxiety, and in some cases, permanent mental damage. Hope's case put Texas in the spotlight. Few states in America kept men in solitary for so long without review or chance of release. In his filings, Hope detailed his conditions. He described living in a cell where he could take only a few steps in each direction. He explained that he had no access to meaningful rehabilitation, no opportunity to re-enter the general prison population, and no clear path out of solitary. He argued that he had been effectively sentenced to live the rest of his life alone in a box. The state of Texas responded that his placement was justified. Hope, they argued, remained an escape risk because of his history. They claimed he posed a continuing threat to security, and the only way to contain that threat was indefinite segregation. The case moved through federal courts. In 2022, the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals considered his appeal. The court did not dismiss his claims. Instead, it acknowledged the seriousness of keeping a man isolated for more than 2 decades. The judges ruled that his lawsuit had enough weight to proceed, a rare win for a prisoner challenging solitary confinement. Hope's case then reached the U.S. Supreme Court in 2023. His lawyers asked the justices to rule on whether such extreme long-term isolation was unconstitutional. The court declined to take the case, leaving the Fifth Circuit's limited ruling intact. Still, for Hope, it was proof that his voice had reached the highest court in the country. Even though no sweeping decision came down, the case shined a light on a system that had gone largely unquestioned. Advocacy groups pointed to Hope's situation as an example of how solitary confinement could become permanent punishment without oversight. Today, Dennis Wayne Hope remains locked away, his world confined to a space no larger than a parking spot. But his story continues to echo far beyond those walls. Remember the question from the beginning? How do you escape from one of Texas's most violent prisons? The answer is preparation. Months of studying patterns, wire cutters hidden in a freezer, blankets cut into strips, cayenne pepper to throw off the dogs, and the ability to run 5 miles in 30 minutes. Dennis Wayne Hope proved that even the most secure prison has weaknesses. He cut through 2 fences, outran armed guards, crossed the highway before the net closed. 90 days of freedom, living in Memphis like a man with nothing to lose. But freedom has a price, and Hope has been paying it ever since. 23 years in solitary confinement, a cell 6 feet by 10, 1 hour a day outside. He escaped from prison, but he never escaped the system. Dennis Wayne Hope, the man who ran faster than anyone expected, and the man who has been running in place ever since. And that brings us to the end of our story. If you like it, do not forget to like and subscribe and activate the bell button so that you can receive new videos.